In the far north of Europe, where winters seem to never end and the silence of the forests is broken only by the wind, Finland hides a secret that could change the fate of the planet's energy. Since 2005, while the world was discussing the risks of nuclear energy, the Finns were literally digging for the solution. A solution that did not shine in the international spotlight, but that may one day be remembered as the greatest turning point in the history of energy. The question was simple, but terrifying. What to do with spent fuel from nuclear power plants? This highly radioactive waste remains dangerous for tens of thousands of years. Beyond generations, beyond empires, it survives everything. And until today, the world has only hidden it in temporary silos, a dormant threat stacked around the planet like a silent army. Meanwhile, Finland, a country of just over 5 million inhabitants and known for its boreal forest, exemplary education, and steaming saunas, has decided to face this problem head-on. With a boldness that surprised even the most experienced experts, he launched a plan that seemed insane: to build the largest nuclear reactor in Europe, OL3, and at the same time, dig a grave to bury the most dangerous waste that humanity has ever produced. Forever. But why Finland? A country that is not even among the energy giants. Why did this nation, far from global conflicts and energy disputes, take on a challenge that many avoid even mentioning? The answer lies in the way the Finns view time. While the rest of the world focuses on decades, they think in centuries. In a world where governments change every 4 years and promises evaporate at the sound of votes, Finland decided to plan for the next 100,000 years. Literally. This story is not just about engineering. It is about courage. It is about a cold, silent nation, almost invisible in the global news, that chose to lead where others retreat. And the journey begins with an almost imperceptible gesture: the first stroke of an underground map, drawn not out of ambition, but out of necessity. In 2005, the construction of OL3 was approved, a third-generation reactor designed to be safer, more efficient, more powerful. A colossus of steel and concrete capable of supplying 14% of the country's energy. And alongside it, the excavation of tunnels that would descend half a kilometer below the surface. Onkalo was born, which in Finnish means cavity. A simple, almost poetic name for the world's most ambitious nuclear waste management project. While excavators advanced beneath the rocky soil of the island of Onkalo, the rest of the world watched the crises that were passing: oil, gas, wars, the market. But there, on the tip of the continent, a centuries-old plan was being put into motion. Not with fanfare, but with the precision of those who understand that the future begins now and needs to be buried with dignity. In 1977, while the world looked at the great nuclear powers with fear and admiration, Finland quietly lit its first atomic star. It was a small step on the global stage, but a huge leap for a country accustomed to relying on the kindness of more powerful neighbors to keep its lights on. The Loviisa 1 nuclear reactor went into operation, and with it, Finland's snow began to glow with an invisible but revolutionary energy. The decision to adopt nuclear power came not from haste, but from necessity. The country, with its harsh winters and few energy options of its own, faced a worrying dependence on Russian and Swedish electricity. In a scenario of geopolitical uncertainty, relying on cables crossing borders was a strategic risk that could no longer be ignored. So, in the following years, Finland did what few expected. In 1980, it activated not just 1, but 3 new reactors: Loviisa 2, Olkiluoto 1, and Olkiluoto 2. With this, practically a third of all the energy consumed in the country began to be generated by nuclear sources. The efficiency of these reactors was remarkable. 95% capacity factor, a figure that put many industrialized countries to shame. But there was something even more remarkable. Unlike other nations that launched nuclear weapons with warlike speeches or promises of power, Finland did so with the discretion of someone carrying a secret. For them, nuclear energy was not a political weapon. It was an existential necessity. The cold does not forgive ideologies. Confidence in the reactors grew. They worked, delivered energy, did not pollute the air, and most importantly, reduced dependence on foreign sources. But there was still a shadow over this success. Waste. Every year, tons of spent fuel accumulated. They were not seen, they were not discussed publicly, but they were there. Silent, toxic, eternal. Yet, for more than 2 decades, the nuclear strategy seemed sound. The population, well-informed and highly educated, maturely accepted the use of nuclear energy, unlike in other countries where protests and fears dominated the debate. In Finland, science spoke louder than panic, and this culture of rationality allowed the country to continue on an isolated but safe path. But in the early 2000s, the game changed. Energy demand grew, climate change became a global issue, and fossil fuels began to be questioned as never before. Finland then decided that it was no longer enough to keep what it had. It was time to take a bigger step, to build something new, something bold. And that's how the OL3 project came about, a promise that would change everything, including the limits of Finnish patience. At the time, few knew that this new reactor would bring so many challenges. But everyone knew one thing: it would be necessary. Because the cold doesn't wait, the economy doesn't stop, and energy, it needs to be there. Always. The atomic glow that began in the 1970s was not a passing flame. It was the beginning of a long-term strategy, built with precision, caution, and an unshakable faith in the power of science. Finland didn't want to be dependent. It wanted to be autonomous, sustainable, and above all, prepared for the centuries to come. The year was 2005. While the world was still recovering from the shocks of the beginning of the century, wars, attacks, and economic fluctuations, Finland made a decision that seemed, at the same time, audacious and insane: to build the largest nuclear reactor in Europe. Its name? OL3. Its mission? Generate 14% of all the country's electricity and consolidate Finland as a world leader in clean and safe energy. In theory, everything was perfect. OL3 would be the first EPR European pressurized reactor in operation, a marvel of nuclear engineering, with advanced safety systems, greater efficiency, and the ability to withstand even plane crashes. A promise that the future of nuclear energy would be cleaner, more reliable, more modern. But between the blueprint on paper and the first electron beam, there was a chasm. Literally. Construction began with enthusiasm. Optimistic investors, confident engineers, proud politicians. The estimated cost was $3.9 billion. The inauguration was scheduled for 2009. But as the foundations were being built, problems began to appear like cracks in fresh concrete. There were flaws in the initial design, contractual conflicts between suppliers and builders, difficulties with materials, and, above all, a recurring challenge in the history of humanity: ego. Giant companies, Arriva, Siemens, TVO, disagreed, exchanged accusations, revised plans. Bureaucracy suffocated engineering. The schedule became a joke, the budget a nightmare. From 2009, the forecast jumped to 2012, then 2014, then 2016, then 2018, and finally 2020, 2022. The cost exceeded $10 billion. It was the most expensive project in Finland's history, a symbol of ambition, but also of frustration. And yet, it was completed. In March 2022, after almost 2 decades of waiting, OL3 began commercial production. Loaded with 116 tons of uranium, the Colossus began to pulse with energy, like a newly awakened heart. There were no fireworks. There were no triumphant speeches. Only the powerful silence of a nation that knows how to wait, that builds to last, that believes that it is worth suffering to win with dignity. OL3 was not just a reactor. It was a test of endurance, a mirror of Finnish patience, and a reminder that true innovation requires time, mistakes, corrections, and above all, vision. But with OL3 up and running, a new question has emerged, now more urgent than ever. Where will the spent fuel it will produce for decades go? The answer, in fact, has been in the works since 2004. And it would be something no other country in the world has ever dared to attempt. In a world obsessed with speed, progress, and consumption, there is a kind of legacy that no country wants to assume. Nuclear waste, invisible, untouched, buried in silence, but alive. Alive for thousands of years, capable of silently killing entire generations. After generating energy for 3 to 6 years, spent fuel turns into a toxic legacy that defies even the notion of time. And the planet, to this day, does not know what to do with it. Around 250,000 tons of high-level waste are stored around the world. They rest in containment pools, in concrete silos, in improvised storage facilities, always under surveillance, always in fear. Because any failure, any earthquake, any attack could turn these places into dead zones for centuries. It is a cruel paradox. Nuclear energy is clean in carbon emissions, efficient, reliable. But its byproduct is an intergenerational burden. Something that scientists measure not in decades or centuries, but in thousands of years. As if it required a civilizational commitment from humans, a pact with the future. In Finland, this issue has never been ignored. From the very beginning, waste had been taken seriously. But there was an uncomfortable truth. However safe the temporary repositories were, they were just that. Temporary. No country in the world, not even those that had invested most heavily in nuclear energy, had found a permanent solution. Until the Finns said, "We're going to bury this. Forever." The concept was radical. Create a deep geological repository, a place where the waste would be sealed away, never to be returned. An atomic graveyard dug into stable rock, hundreds of meters below the surface, isolated from everything, from air, water, and humanity. Many thought the idea was absurd. Burying radioactive waste so deep seemed like the stuff of science fiction. Others feared that time would corrode the barriers, that the copper would rust, that a distant future, with no memory of the past, would dig up the site by mistake and unleash the curse. But Finland insisted, because burying was not an act of desperation, but of responsibility, a gesture of respect for the future, something that required not only engineering, but humility. While the world kept postponing the problem, piling up containers, and pushing decisions to future governments, the Finns kept digging, studying, testing, until they arrived at an answer that no other country had dared to achieve. This place would have a simple name: Onkalo, a hole in the ground. But inside it, Finland would bury more than waste. It would bury fear. It would bury procrastination. It would finally bury the darkest part of nuclear energy with a silent and terrifying dignity. Deep in the rocky depths of the island of Olkiluoto in western Finland, there is a place where time loses its meaning. A dark and silent labyrinth, dug half a kilometer below the surface, far from the reach of water, air, or war. Its name is Onkalo, and in it will lie the most dangerous waste that human beings have ever produced. Forever. Onkalo is not a power plant. It is not a bunker. It is not a prison. It is a tomb, the tomb of eternal fire. The only place on the planet deliberately built to last 100,000 years. A project that defies not only the laws of physics, but also those of human memory. Because how can we warn future civilizations that this place must not be touched if we don't even know what language they will speak in 5,000 years? Yet Finland has decided to move forward, calmly, precisely, with an almost silent faith in its own logic. Since 2004, the tunnels have been excavated. Long corridors wind through the ancient granite. There, each spent fuel capsule will be encased in boron steel, then sealed in pure copper, and finally surrounded by bentonite clay, a natural barrier that swells with humidity, sealing all spaces and preventing any leaks. There will be no conspicuous signs, no visible doors. Onkalo will be sealed, left behind, like an inverted shrine, not for visitation, but for oblivion. The goal is clear. No human being should ever need to intervene there. Funded by a mandatory tax on electricity sales, the project does not depend on political promises or electoral cycles. It is moving forward steadily, quietly, out of sight of the world. Its capacity to store all of Finland's nuclear waste until the year 2120. After that, it will be closed and left untouched for millennia. The International Atomic Energy Agency has declared the project a landmark. Other countries, including Sweden, France, and Canada, have begun to study it. But none have yet managed to replicate Finland's unique combination of stable geology, highly educated society, political consensus, and a long-term vision rare in the modern world. Onkalo is not just a technological victory, it is a philosophical one. It represents the moment when a nation refused to pass on its mistakes to future generations. Instead of sweeping the rubbish under the rug of history, it buried it with honor, as if recognizing that even the worst of our legacies deserves accountability. And now, with a sixth nuclear reactor already planned, Finland continues to quietly lead the most complex energy transition of the century. While the world debates, it builds. While many fear nuclear, it masters it. And while others pile up waste like time bombs, Finland digs and keeps quiet and seals, because there are gestures so profound that they need no applause, only time and stone. If this story made you reflect on the future of humanity, don't keep that feeling to yourself. Like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, comment on what touched you the most, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that leave their mark. Change starts with knowledge.